Hello and welcome to a brand new hardware review today with a monitor, and since it's a monitor there's no point in actually having a green screen on the background because I can pretty much get the best effect possible by pointing a camera at the monitor itself. This is the LG 24MP59G, sometimes -P, which is a horrible name for a monitor. It's very easily confused with the 24MP, no, I think that was 24VQ. No, I think that was the MP2. There's another monitor just like identical to this one, and because they're both on sale now, they're the same price. Only that one doesn't have DisplayPort. This one does. And I got this monitor with my own money because I have a day job. YouTube does not pay the bills. I wish it could, but it's never gonna happen. Oh boy, it won't. Yeah, and because I got it, I said, hey, why not review it? I mean, I've looked all over the internet for a review of this thing. None of them exist because people like Linus Tech Tips and other stuff, they don't review stuff that's, you know, this cheap. They generally review stuff that's making you kind of wonder, are they the main source of meth for Canada? Who knows, maybe. I don't know. I'm just making jokes. I'm not in any way accusing them of producing meth. Do not send hitmen after me. Oh god, they're going to send a hitman after me. I'm going to die. Well, let's get on with the actual review of this thing and see what good it is, because according to the internet you don't actually know. And why would I say you don't actually know? Well, it's because when you look at product reviews of this thing on the web, you generally don't get an accurate sense of what exactly it is capable of, because, and here's something you should probably know, and you should know, like, pay attention. The people that review things on Amazon, on different sites or stores sites, they are generally people that bought these things. They are not experts necessarily, so when they say, it doesn't seem to work with the cable, they are actually saying that, it doesn't seem to work with the cable that I have, which is HDMI 1, and not the HDMI that comes with it. So yeah, that's the reason why it wouldn't work with another HDMI cable, because it has a different standard, a newer one that allows you to use FreeSync. So yeah, that's one of the main draws of this monitor. It is 75 Hz and is capable of using FreeSync if you have a Radeon graphics card built from well, basically anything that uses the new CDN, or what was it called, the thing they built after the 6000 series, the 7000 series and onwards. The graphics core next, GCN. Yeah, that was the thing. All those video cards are capable of using FreeSync, which is a method of more accurately allowing you to synchronize the frames that are being output by the video card with the monitor itself. It's not VSync. Like VSync does something else. VSync locks the maximum frame rate you output to the top end of the monitor, and they still may not mesh well with each other. That's one of the problems. That's why G-Sync and FreeSync were made. FreeSync does basically the opposite. It tells the monitor, hey, you don't display something until I have a free. Look at me. Do not display. Did you just display? No, you didn't. No. Good. Now display this. Now that's what FreeSync does. G-Sync does it even better because it has a module built into it that I believe actually has lower latency. I gotta be honest. I don't have the proper tools to do a full professional review of this monitor. I do not have color accuracy testing methods. I do not have a high-speed camera to actually test, well, how well it works at high speeds. I did take some footage with this camera. You're seeing it now in the background. It is wretched, absolutely wretched. I cannot move anything on the screen without it just becoming a horrible blur. And that's not because of the monitor. Like, what I was seeing on the monitor was still looking good, but on the camera, because it's 50 frames interlaced, meaning 25 frames a second real frames, it does not look good. So I'm sorry, but I cannot give you proper footage of this monitor working at high speeds, or I cannot give you a accurate assumption of how well it displays color. I can just tell you my experience, and which is probably what this review is going to boil down to. So let's get on with the the details of it. This is a 23.8-inch monitor. I'm not sure how inches work, because LG seems to think that 23.8 is the same as 24. They even wrote it on box as being 24. it's not. It's 23.8 with again, it's 0.2 of an inch, so it's not that big. I'm guessing it's maybe it's the same thing. I don't know. Still, it's bigger than 23 inches. Like the monitor next to it is just 23 inches, and the difference is kind of noticeable. That one, by the way, is a BenQ something or other with a ESP panel that's kind of a bit old. Not sure exactly 100% what kind of IPS panel it's using. It's an LG one. I'm not. It may be one of the newer ones. Like, well, no, it's a newer one because it's 75 Hz display. But I cannot accurately tell you exactly the precise type of display it is using currently because I couldn't find it. It's usually in the manual. I don't think it was in the manual. Sadly, well, I checked, but I couldn't find it. But the important thing is that the display can output pretty much 99+% of the sRGB spectrum, well, the gamut, and I'll get into that soon. And yeah, the most important feature this thing has, well, one of the reasons the reason I got it for, is that it has a refresh rate of 75 Hz. Now, if you're a younger person, you have not seen monitors with more than 60 Hz in your life. If you're an old geezer like me, you remember back when monitors, CRT ones, went all the way up to 85 routinely. 75 Hz was the baseline you would use for one of those monitors. 60 was gonna give you eyesores. 85, that was even better, but hey, I don't have an 85 Hz monitor yet, but hey, I'm getting, like, at least I'm back to 75. I'm back to the baseline of what a CRT monitor could do. Now, is it noticeable? Because there's a very fine difference between 60 and 75. It's just 15 frames a second. So is it actually noticeable? Well, it depends. There are some scenes, like really small ones where, you know, you have a lot of particles like snow or ashes or something blowing in the wind quickly. You do actually notice the difference in fluidity. I would have wanted to try and do an accurate side-by-side comparison between monitor 1 and monitor 2 by cloning the output of monitor 1 to monitor 2, but here's the thing, I could only do that by making this monitor look wretched, because it would be outputting at 75 Hz on both. Windows did not let me actually output at different hertz on each of them, which is kind of sad, and so the experiment would have been completely futile, which is sadly also the reason why I couldn't properly test the difference between the response rates of this one and this one, though from what I've been using until now, they kind of feel sort of the same. I mean, they're both IPS, they're both quick enough IPS screens. I haven't had issues with ghosting on either of them in normal working conditions. Now, those 75 Hz are very, very useful, because, well, no wait, first we have the inputs. This thing is HDMI, on which it is running right now. I've been using it through the HDMI port. It also has DisplayPort, which I have not tested with yet. I don't have a cable for it. I'm planning on doing a separate video where I compare the implementation of FreeSync from HDMI with the one from direct input, from DisplayPort, direct input, DisplayPort, same thing. It also has VGA, which I won't be using because there's no point to using VGA currently. Also has an audio jack if you want to output sound via the HDMI, or I believe also the DisplayPort works too. And also I believe I wrote something here, but I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, it's something about scaling. I'm gonna get that soon. Yeah, the reason why I got this monitor particularly is because it has both HDMI and DisplayPort. And I've, again, from people that have written reviews, I have read that there are problems with FreeSync through HDMI, or with 75 Hz monitors that run through just HDMI. Namely, that unless you enable FreeSync, it will not run at 75 Hz, and it may not even run at 75 Hz on non-AMD cards. Also, you could not actually enter in the BIOS in any non-operating system type screen if you didn't have the FreeSync enabled, or you were using it on the with 75 Hz enabled, but on a NVIDIA card. And I want to avoid that as much as possible, so this is why I got the monitor that also has DisplayPort, in the belief that, well, if HDMI has a limitation, then maybe at least I can use the DisplayPort and circumvent it. Well, I don't have to. Like, either those people were wrong about the other monitor, or this one just has different connections because it also has DisplayPort and doesn't exhibit any of those issues. It runs perfectly at 75 Hz, even without FreeSync, through HDMI. It works in the BIOS. It works everywhere. It just works. It's well, I would have said it worked out of the box, but you know, I've had issues with the graphics card when I installed it, right, where it didn't work. Like, my system didn't work at all. Well, when I installed this monitor, I did not hot plug it, even though HDMI is hot pluggable. The video card would not output anything to the monitor, this one or the other one, and it would just light up red, meaning that the fans were going 100% or close to it, or very high, and would just not do anything. It would boot into Windows, like I could hear it booting into Windows, but it didn't actually display anything, so it was kind of annoying. After I got in the other PC and showed this PC that, yeah, the monitor works, it, out of shame, decided to cooperate, and now it's been working fine, as long as I don't actually move it, because it's kind of... I'm planning on changing it next year. I mean, it's about time. So, let's get to the most important thing first. FreeSync. Does it work? Well, yes, it does. It absolutely does. I've tested it in as many games as I could, in as many situations as I could. I tested this in Half-Life 2 because, honestly, there are only a handful of games where I had trouble with the screen tearing. Those were Half-Life 2, because it was running at over 200 frames a second. By the way, Half-Life 2 is capped at 299 frames a second, so it's at least not going to burn out any video cards by, you know, overexerting them. And I also had troubles in older games like Severance: The Blade of Darkness, which I didn't actually test on this one because I don't have it installed right now and I couldn't get it. But I did test it out in several other games that exhibited some issues with tearing. And FreeSync does alleviate those problems as long as you are in the refresh range that is enabled in FreeSync, namely between 30, 40, and 75 Hz. This monitor does not have low frame rate compensation, meaning that if it drops below 40, the FreeSync option will shut off. By the way, the FreeSync option can just be enabled through the menu, like, got it right here. Under Game Adjustments, FreeSync. It comes with it off by default in case you have an NVIDIA display, but once it's on, it's basically just on forever, like in the display, and you can disable and enable it on the fly through the AMD Catalyst, and it'll work. It'll take a few seconds for it to kick in or kick off, but it'll just work. So that's a very important thing to note. But there is the issue of you need to keep your game between 40 and 75 frames a second, and honestly that shouldn't be that much of a problem. I actually had to turn up the detail in games like Rainbow Six Siege, because in exterior shots it may dip below 60, but in interior shots it would jump over to 100 in some areas. So I turned up the detail to 4x MSAA, so it will run a bit slower, so that the effect would be more noticeable without enabling a VSync. VSync is an option. You can enable VSync and you will be kept at a maximum of 75 frames a second, meaning that the monitor and the video card through FreeSync and VSync will do their best to cooperate and try to display the exact frames that you are outputting and it is displaying. Now keep in mind that VSync does add some latency. I cannot tell you how much. I do not have the tools to measure the latency. Again, a camera. Just a camera that can do even 30 frames a second normally. The 60 would have been better. Could have probably let me do that test, but I don't actually have one. The phone itself can't really do 60 frames a second 1080p that well. I mean, in terms of accuracy with frame by frame, it's still a really tiny phone, but it still looks better than cameras sometimes. That's why I recorded some of the video with the phone that you're maybe seeing from time to time in the background when I have to cut this and make it seem a bit seamless. Still, I wouldn't say that VSync adds so much overhead in terms of latency that it is unplayable with it. It is still playable. I still have not a noticeable depreciation in my ability to play video games. Though again, I'm not what you would call a Twitch shooter. I am not a esports kind of person. I don't count my success in real-time strategy games via my actions per minute. I just play them for fun, which I know is kind of a very unusual thing. So FreeSync works. That's basically what I have to say. Oh yeah, there was the thing about the FreeSync implementation for borderless mode. Borderless mode is a bit of a strange thing. You don't actually output you don't see the output of the how should I put this? You're locked to what the Windows Desktop Manager thing can do, not to what the game engine can do, so there's a bit of an issue there. I read up on the internet, which means it's probably wrong, that FreeSync does work for borderless mode. I cannot tell you for certain because there is no tearing with or without it, but there is a bit more of the kind of you know, stuttering that you sometimes get with VSync. VSync, by the way, yeah, FreeSync does help with decreasing stutter that you may sometimes encounter when you just enable VSync. I even downloaded that test with the windmill that shows you basically how well it works, how well both VSync works both with FreeSync enable and VSync disable and vice versa. I tried to do that test again manually in GTA 5 and I did get some results. Some of them, I can see some of the phone footage where I tried to enable some stuttering by disabling FreeSync and putting the some motion on the video, and I did get some tearing there, and I did manage to eliminate it just by enabling FreeSync again. I have been told, well, I've been told by people that actually have the necessary tools to test it out, that FreeSync may add some bit of ghosting. I have not been able to confirm this because I don't have, again, the proper tools to actually take a snapshot that is that fine of a single frame, but I did not notice any visible ghosting when the monitor is set to its default standard operating methods with FreeSync enabled. It does, however, feature ghosting if you set the response time to high. By default, it is it has a system for compensating for response time. By default, it's set to medium. You can set it to off, and when you set it off, it feels a bit choppier. I'm not sure exactly if it's something that you can see on the background because I may try to insert this, but it felt a bit choppier with it off. With it in the medium mode, yeah, it works just fine. And when you set it to high, in the high setting, it tries its best to draw as fast as possible, and it will do it without actually properly cleaning the screen first, so that's when you get tearing. That's when you get some ghosting. So you see an after image of things moving, but in the medium mode, it actually works out just fine. This other monitor has the exact same problem. If you set it with, well, it's not a problem, it's sort of it's how they're built. If you want faster drawing, but without the advantage of, you know, everything being wiped, you can set that, you can enable that, otherwise you're fine with what it does by standard. By standard, this has a 5 millisecond refresh, you know, time between drawing something, deleting it, and drawing a new one. You know, the gray to gray or something response time. It has a 1 millisecond mode. It's called a blur reduction mode. It is incompatible with FreeSync, and it's quite easily noticeable why it is incompatible. Well, it should be actually. When I recorded the video, it was clearly visible on the little display on the camera that the screen was being strobed, like the LEDs behind the panel were being strobed on and off, on and off, on and off in an attempt to reduce blur. And yeah, it did reduce blur, but the strobing effect was incredibly noticeable. For me, it was jarring, and I wouldn't use that like in any circumstance. Yeah, blurring was less noticeable, but no, it just looked horrible. The camera, however, does not seem to have picked that up. I mean, I watched the video a while ago, and it still looked like the normal image. So yeah, sort of, it seems that the sensor can pick up the strobing, the LCD can display it on it, but in the end, it just can't actually properly create the video that will show you what you should have seen, which is why I really want to get a new camera one day, maybe next year or in 2 years. Apart from that, it also has something called a black equalizer, which is something that is enabled only through HDMI according to the manual. Oh, by the way, you may have seen, going back to FreeSync a bit because it's important, some of you have pointed out that this does not support FreeSync to HDMI because it says so on the bottom of the site of the monitor of the LG site that HDMI FreeSync is only available through HDMI, through DisplayPort. That's not correct. That's maybe there because every other monitor in the past couple of years only had FreeSync through DisplayPort, but this one does support it through HDMI. It also has VGA. VGA does not support FreeSync. It's an analog standard, so maybe it was a typo, maybe they left it there by accident, but it absolutely works through HDMI. I should know. I've been using it through HDMI for a month. Now, going onward, there's the black equalizer, which is only an HDMI thing. It says so in the manual. It doesn't seem to be available for DisplayPort. What it does is it makes the screen darker if you set it to low. So it lowers the blacks, I think, with something. If you set it to high, it's the default. The default one level of blackness you have in the contrast ratio you set, in the color profile you set. Oh, by the way, it does come with the default color profile, which I found a bit too dark, so I just made my own. Yeah, the thing with the darker black sort of seemed pleasant at first. Like, it can make movies seem a bit, more clear. It doesn't really compensate for the fact that you're still looking at an sRGB monitor. It's not really, HDR wide gamut or something like that. It's not an OLED screen, but it also, because the blackness isn't actually created by lowering the light of just the black spots, it just darkens everything near them. You'll also lose detail in those dark areas. For example, you have the color green, like maybe it's a dark, it's a forest at night, and it's lit by a blue moon. You're gonna lose all the green in that picture. But it will look darker, but you'll lose all the green, it'll just look blue from the moon. It's a trade-off that I really don't want to make. Also, you have the black level setting, which you can actually set the amount of highlighting that the color black will have in the display. By default, it's set to 50%, so right in half. But you can set it to be either higher or lower depending on your preference. The reason why you would set it to the lowest thing possible is, well, if you're playing something like Rainbow Six Siege against characters that are wearing all black in dark environments, it'll be easier to notice them if you set it to basically nothing. But I honestly don't like it because it just makes everything else look washed out. On mediums, on the standard setting, it looks just fine. So now let's get to the 99% sRGB. As I've said, I cannot test it, but from what I've seen, it's basically kind of the same gamut that the other monitor has, and I'm okay with what that one does. I got the other monitor a couple of years ago when I was still using the TN that now died, and when going from the TN to this one, I was just blown away that the video I was working on using the TN looked just horrible on the IPS screen, because the IPS could actually display all the colors, so some things were just horrible, like my face. Oh my god, my face was horribly colored. I started using color correction since then. Well, not in this video because I don't... Well, maybe a bit. We'll see how it works in post. So, is 99+% sRGB good for professional work? Now, it depends on actually what kind of professional work you're doing. If you're doing what I do, yeah, it's no problem, it's no issue. sRGB is what everybody has, you won't have any problems with it. If you're actually working on high-end photography, I mean, photography for magazines or for people that know what photography is, not people that bought a camera and are now super duper photographs, professionals, that may not be enough. Well, I know it's not enough. sRGB is not enough for accurate, proper, print level, high quality photography, like super professional work. But then again, this is a monitor that costs around, well, it says 170 bucks, which is kind of, yeah, that's around what it costs. You're not going to get a professional level grade screen for 170 bucks. Those cost a couple of $1,000s, and they are manually calibrated in the factory, and they're usually made by AIZO or something like that. They, well, 99+ sRGB is fine if you're not going to make Lord of the Rings, if you're not going to grade movies that are made to be shown on the cinema. It'll work just okay. There'll be no problem with it. It's fine. No issues whatsoever. But again, if you do want to make a magnum opus of color and variety that will be displayed in the Louvre, get a more expensive monitor that actually has HDR. Because HDR is a thing now. This doesn't have HDR. It's still a really kind of okayish IPS. Cheaper IPS panels have come a long way since the ages of them costing $1 billion. Now, onto the Other thing, oh yeah, if you don't, particularly if you have problems with seeing colors, this monitor has quite a lot of options for you. You can set colors both in RGB mode like red, blue, green, and also you can set them in the 6 color variants, you know, cyan, magenta, yellow, the other ones. You can set them individually so you'll have the exact proper color palette you want. It also has color weakness mode, meaning that you can set it to be more properly in tune to your inability to see a certain color. Like it will have that by default. The options also let you, oh yeah, it comes with a software that you can install. It's optional. It allows you to use multiple displays on the same monitor, and you can use it to basically split this monitor into several displays, like side by side, picture in picture, and all sorts of stuff. It does come with many default presets for color and lighting, but oh yeah, and for game modes. Do not actually enable those because one of them is the strobing low, you know, the blur reduction mode, which will disable FreeSync. You'll have to enable it again, and it's kind of a pain because you basically, it's kind of a pain. Okay, no, I didn't actually mention any of the physical characteristics of it. I'm still not gonna. I'm gonna get them in a moment. 2 things I like to note first is that there is a bit of a bleed. Like IPS panels sometimes have light bleeding, and there is some of it like in this corner a bit. It's really only noticeable if you're watching a completely black scene, and it's not all that disturbing. If it's just black on that and some detail there, you may lose the detail, but if it's something brighter, yeah, you won't have that much problem. It's not a big problem, and again, it will change depending on well, it differs from panel to panel, from monitor to monitor. And the other thing is that it does have one, it sadly has one that pixel. It's right here. It's right there. It's near the middle of the screen. It's not in the middle of the screen, it's near the middle of the screen. And it is going to drive me insane, but I'm going to try and make a separate video where I try to remove that pixel, to revive it, to bring it back to life. Hopefully without ruining the monitor. I have seen that there are methods, so-called methods, on the internet that let you revive a dead pixel on monitor. It may work, it may not. I'm going to document it, and maybe, hopefully with the money I make from that video, get a replacement, because I'm probably going to break this by trying it. Hopefully it won't happen. If you're an enthusiast of older games, you know, like any older game that's not running in widescreen, you'll be happy to know that this thing does come with, well, I'm gonna actually show you. Not that. You can set the volume if you have a you have something you know, headset put into the jack of the monitor. You can set the volume there. It also has this thing. You probably can't see it, but it says aspect ratio original. By default, it's set wide. You're gonna have to go into a game that is not 16:9. You know, any DOS box game will do, and you will then have the monitor will then tell you, hey, you're not in the right resolution, not in the right aspect ratio. That's when you go into that menu, and that ratio part that was grayed out will be now usable, and you set that from wide to original, and bam, you will get games that will work on their proper aspect ratio. That will not happen if you have GPU display scaling on. I kept it on at first because I thought, hey, the GPU can do it right now. GPU display scaling on Radeon seems to be a bit borked. For some reason, it sometimes just won't work. Something else that is borked on Radeon from time to time is the, well, going back to FreeSync a bit, the frame rate limiter. In some games it will work. Like I tried to set it to 70 frames a second in Half-Life 2, and it worked. Like it worked flawlessly with FreeSync enabled. I was getting 70 frames, no tearing, basically no lag. It was just amazing. But in games like Rainbow Six Siege and the one I actually tried it first on, the SWAT 4, it did not work. Like the frame meter was not working, and it was still spiking over the limit of FreeSync and going into tearing territory, which was kind of sad. So what do we have left on this thing? Oh yeah, the physical characteristics of it. It's got one of those anti-glare coating on it, so it's impossible to clean if you get it dirty with any kind of grease. Don't eat anything greasy next to it, ever. And when you clean it, be careful. Also use microfiber. I didn't! On the first day I got this, I managed to get it dirty. I was celebrating and things happened. And now for the stand itself. This thing. I'm not sure exactly how well you can see it on the camera. It's not the best. Not completely the worst. It's... Oh, you tell me if it's shaking. It is kind of shaking a bit. Also, if you're gonna type like a maniac, you may have some shake to it, but for the most part it stands still. I really wish it had a bigger like arm connecting the stand to the base itself, and maybe a bigger base that, you know, is not just a V shape, it's more of a round thing. Well, this thing has a rounder thing, but it still shakes from time to time, so it's really not that. Remember when monitors were gigantic and had stands the size of your double size of your head? Those things never shook. Those things were solid as rock. We need to go back to those, or just get monitor arms and bolt them down to the desk. I think this has a VESA mount. I actually didn't check behind to see if it has a VESA mount. It may have. Not exactly sure. Don't actually care. I'm not planning on actually bolting anything to it anytime soon. One thing to note is that this is actually quite a lot thinner than the other one, mostly because the power brick is not in the power delivery system is not inside it. It's in the power brick, like right next to the cable, right on the cable. The cable is quite short, by the way. Also comes with an HDMI cable that is also quite short, so you probably won't keep the monitor too far away from a power outlet or from your computer. I'm guessing, well, that's pretty much all I had written down, all it is on this thing I had written down about the monitor. Let's see, FreeSync again, FreeSync works. Oh yeah, the luminosity, it's 250 nits, which is... it's kind of on the low side. Like, I've seen monitors go down all the way to 200, but still it's okay. Again, you're not gonna get HDR here, though honestly, something like 300 or 350 would have been better. But again, that's not what the panel can do, since it's more of a cheaper panel. But again, it's 75 Hz that you get, real 75 Hz, not interlaced or anything. And it works, like I said, in the FreeSync range from 40 to 75. Oh, did I mention the... I mentioned this thing doesn't have low frame rate compensation, right? Low frame rate compensation is when at first I thought that the driver was responsible for this, but no, it's the firmware of the monitor, it's the actual monitor itself that I believe asks for a second frame when the frame rate goes below what it can do, what it needs to sustain an image. It'll ask for a second frame for a clone of the frame rate just displayed, and display it again, so it'll basically double its apparent refresh rate, but still keep the same frame rate. It doesn't do that. The G-Sync monitors all do that. They have that enabled through the the G-Sync module, and newer monitors that support FreeSync do have that option. This one does not. Let's see, went through that. The blur reductions is not something I would use. It's a strobing effect that's kind of annoying. The ghosting on the response life, yes, I've said that. Black levels. Let's see, black level equalizer. It has HDMI, DisplayPort, and VGA. Like I said, I'm going to try and do a different video with how FreeSync works between HDMI and DisplayPort. It's got 99% sRGB, which it's still sRGB. It's not going to blow your socks off if you've had a CRT monitor, because thing note, all CRT monitors had 100% sRGB. So LCDs were still playing catch up until quantum dots and HDR and OLEDs. Okay, aspect ratio, you should disable GPA scaling. FreeSync, yeah, I keep hearing that it had some kind of problems with HDMI. It doesn't. Let's see, borderless mode, yeah, I covered that one. Color weakness covered. The multi, partitioning the monitor support in the software. It's thin, short cables, a little bleed, and yeah, basically that's it. Would I recommend this monitor? Yes, it works. Unless you go crazy because it may have one dead pixel in your favorite part of the screen, it's an excellent monitor for the price. It's got DisplayPort, it's got HDMI, it will work with either. It works with HDMI better than I thought it would. like much better than I thought it would. I'm happy with it. I'm happy with my purchase. I kind of wish I could have afforded the 27-inch one, though. In a sense, maybe not. Oh yeah, pardon me. The most important thing I didn't mention, this is 1080p. It's 1080p, so the 27-inch one would have been better, like bigger. It would have been bigger, but the pixels on 1080p would have been a bit more noticeable than they are now. I'm guessing, well yeah, this is probably the biggest size you would want for a 1080p monitor. Any bigger and the pixels, like you'll see the pixels, the individual pixels when you're looking at it at close range. So yeah, it's probably fine. The basic idea is that it's a good monitor, it works. I've not had problems with it apart from when I installed it, the video cards died for a moment or two, but then it sort of got back and now it works. It's a monitor that works, it's functional. The 75Hz may be quite good for you because it has a refresh range, well, a FreeSync range that goes from 40 to 75. That's 35 Hz, 35 frames a second, 35 frames of wiggle room you have there. That's more than you would get on a 60 frame FreeSync monitor, much more. It's quite good. Yeah, I'm happy with my purchase, and if you get one, let me know how your experience is with it. So far I've not had problems with it, but hey, you know, maybe there's something I missed and maybe you ran into something that I will encounter later on. I wish I had better tools to actually do this review properly, but hey, I gotta do what I can with the things I have, and sadly, the phone and that camera is all that I can afford right now, sadly. And again, I'm gonna do a video about different FreeSync implementations through DisplayPort and HDMI, and I'm gonna see about getting rid of that pixel, which is quite annoying. Oh yeah, one last thing. Because this is a gaming monitor, it does have a crosshair mode that lets you enable a crosshair on the screen. It's kind of useless unless you're playing games that don't have the crosshair. Other than that, it's fine. Goodbye.